Good morning again. I see our numbers jumping up. So we have folks joining us for our third session of the morning. Somehow it's already 10:30. Learning some amazing things with Max at ADP. And now we're going to transition hearing from Candace Coach at Aon. Aon has been a partner with MACPA for decades and servicing the CPA profession for, I think, 75 years. I saw an anniversary, which is just amazing. Wow, what a history of service to our profession. And so I'm going to hand it over to Candace, who's going to talk about, okay, in this fast changing profession, all these trends that we're seeing, what do we need coverage wise? So Candace, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And thank you all for joining this morning. Appreciate the partnership we have with the MACPA and appreciate being able to service the profession from the professional liability standpoint. So this morning, I'll be talking about addressing professional liability coverage needs in this fast-changing, ever-changing profession. So just a little bit of background. I work for the AICPA member insurance program, and I manage a team of advisors who our job is to make sure our CPAs and our financial professionals are protecting themselves and their businesses in the best way. And so we offer solutions for them to do just that. So as we know, the profession is changing, it's evolved. I've been just working on this in this profession for the past 7 years, and the evolution over the past 7 years has been incredible. So from the professional liability standpoint, we'll talk about just what needs to be considered when things are changing, and why you need to consider what needs to be considered. So just a quick disclaimer. I'll flash up for a moment. Right, so the evolution of the profession changes your need for how you protect your business, right? So the professional services you perform are protected by a professional liability or errors and omissions policy. And those needs change, obviously, as the profession changes, as you begin to offer different professional services, bring on staff. So we'll talk about just what to consider there. So the one question I always talk to my clients about, and the one thing you should always ask yourself when you are in the market for any solution to protect your business is, what do you need to protect? So like, what aspect of your business do you need to protect? Is it the work you need to protect? Is it the people you need to protect? And what has taken place to cause you to even think about protecting those things? So just a few, when and why to evaluate the business insurance needs. You should be evaluating that on a regular cadence and asking yourself a few questions. So you should consider your business internally. You should consider the industry, what's changed in the industry, your client contracts. If there is a new contract, a new client you are engaging that has a client that has specific requirements of you. So those are a few things to consider in the beginning. And then how has your firm changed internally, right? So are you offering new services? Have you hired? Do you have new staff? Have you acquired or merged? Are you bringing on staff from, the business that you may have acquired? Or are you going to be commingling with professionals from the business you've merged with? And then how has the profession changed? So we know, there are always regulations, especially in the CPA world, that come about. So there are things that you've got to consider about the profession itself. We know BOI is like a really big thing now. So that's new to the profession and new to CPAs, not necessarily new, but a new service that CPAs are looking to offer. So that's something to consider. And then again, your client's coverage requirements. Is there a contract in place? There may be a client that you've worked with forever that never required you to carry certain limits of liability or even have insurance. And then there are clients that in order to begin to engage with them from the beginning, you must have a certain level of liability in order to engage with them. So it's something that when you're bringing on a new client, you can flat out ask, right? Do you have a requirement for me from an insurance perspective? So some clients will say no, as long as you have it. I'm glad you have it. And then other clients will say yes, you'll need to carry at least X limit of liability. And then has your business changed with the profession, right? So if you're evaluating your business and you're asking yourself, how has my business changed? And if the answer is, no or not much, then the next question is my business changing with the profession, right? Are we growing together? Are we evolving, and are we making sure we are, kind of up with the times? So I kind of just talked about new risks like BOI services and the use of generative AI, right? If you don't know, or if you've not delved into either one of those specific things, then it's something that even if it's not going to impact your business, something that you should definitely educate yourself with, and make sure if it does come about, your professional liability is able to cover you. So then another question you'll ask yourself, how can I assess what my coverage needs are, right? So how do I know if I don't have a client contract, and I, don't really have any rules to follow, regulations to follow as far as professional liability is considered, how can I assess what I need, right? So there's plenty of data, right? You'll want to make sure that you are sizing up to other CPA firms like yours, right? So there is data that is you can access that data from the AICPA program or whoever your carrier is, and you can ask the question, what do firms like my firm do? What do my firms like my firm have as far as coverage is concerned, right? I'm a $400,000 firm. I have two professionals. We perform these particular services. What do you have any other firms that look like my firm? And if so, what types of coverages do they have? Right. And that's benchmarking data, or data that you can use to assess the type of coverage you need. If you don't have an idea of what you should get, you'll have an advisor, or you should have an advisor that will steer you in the right direction. And if not, when you are contacting your carrier or your broker or agent, you should definitely be able to ask for information to help you make an informed decision. So benchmarking data or assessment data. So there are three parts of a professional liability policy that can make or break you. And that comes down to if and when there's a claim that arises, if these three parts aren't in good order, that could definitely impact your business in a negative way. So first part is your limit of liability, right? So the limit of liability is the limit that your insurance will pay out in the event there is a claim, right? So there are many factors you should consider. You should look at, if you're kind of new to this and you're just trying to say, okay, I want to just take the bare minimum. I advise against that, right? You've got to ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen? And then how much could it cost? Right. So it's not always, I only charge my client this amount, so they can only sue me for this amount, or, the tax return was only this amount. So that's not necessarily the worst case scenario. So while I am not a person to like that likes to look at the negative or the worst case scenario in situations. Definitely when choosing your limit of liability, you'll want to ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Right? And you want to insure for the worst that can happen. You want to consider, do I have high net worth clients? Right? What's the worst that can happen with one of my high net worth clients, and what would that cost me? Do I control funds? So a lot of family office services are performed for high net worth clients, and the funds are controlled, right? So if something is mismanaged or something takes place with those funds, your insurance policy or your limit of liability should be able to cover the worst case scenario in that situation. You'll think about, if you are controlling client funds, how much, right? Like how much money do you have access to? Or if you're moving money around or you're paying bills, like how much money is at your fingertips that could potentially end up in a mistake or an error or omission that you would then need to use the limit of liability. Other things to consider are, what are your revenues, right? What are your firm's revenues? If you're a $400,000 firm, you definitely want to insure for more than what your firm's revenues are. If there's client contract, again, client contracts will say you must have this limit of liability to engage with us, right? And the reason those contracts are in place is because they kind of have an idea of what the worst case scenario is and what it would cost. So you'll definitely want to abide by the client contract. And then the one thing I always, say to my firms is, insurance is here to give you peace of mind, right? So what makes you comfortable? What allows you to sleep peacefully at night, right? Knowing that if something happened, you have sufficient limits and sufficient coverages in place in order to protect you and protect your business. So the second thing is your deductible. Do I go high? Do I go low? I know a lot of times, you figure if I have a higher deductible, I pay less, right? But deductibles should be looked at as I pay first, right? So what deductible could you pay that's not going to be cost prohibitive for your business, right? So if your firm's revenues have increased, right, from year to year, and you are in a place where you feel like you can increase the deductible because you do have the capital to take on the higher retention, then that is a good idea. Or if something's changing in your firm and you kind of want to decrease the deductible just to make sure, again, you've got the capital to cover that first dollar, because it's the first thing that's activated, the first thing that you pay in the event of a claim. So you want to make sure you are comfortable with the deductible, whether it be a higher or a lower deductible. I will say, just from looking at policies and premiums every day, that when you toggle with the deductible back and forth, it does not change the premium very much. And that should not be the main reason you're changing your deductible. You should be changing your deductible thinking about the retention you, as a business owner, are able to absorb. And there's another piece of limits when we talk about limits of liability deductible that comes into play. And it's something that I often talk to firms about, that they don't quite understand, but once we explain it, and it makes much sense to them. So your claim expenses are the expenses that are paid first before damages are paid. So you can have your claim expenses be part of your main limit of liability, which subtracts from the main limit of liability, or you can have it be in addition to the limit of liability. So do you want to have, are you comfortable with having the first dollars come out of your main limit, right? Is your limit of liability sufficient enough for that to take place? Or do you want to have your claim expenses paid from a different bucket? From from a premium standpoint, having it paid from a separate bucket is a little bit more, but it's, in my opinion, very well worth it, because you've got to think, when the peace of mind, when it is time to actually pay the claim, you don't have to do any math, right? You've got the full limit of liability left to pay damages in the event damages must be paid. So there are other coverages aside from the main professional liability or errors and omissions policy that complements that, that will help you protect your business. One of the main things that, and the most important additional coverages, is cyber, right? Everyone knows that cyber claims are on the rise, I'd say from year to year, but it's day to day, right? Cyber is a must-have. Hackers are getting much more sophisticated by the day. And, as soon as we identify, uh, they're able to compromise our systems in one way, they find a new way, right? So it is very, very important to make sure we protect ourselves with cyber. There is not very much built into a main professional liability policy that covers cyber, like a cyber incident. There are steps that must be taken in the event of a breach, from a regulatory standpoint, that only a cyber policy covers, right? So notifying your clients and offering credit monitoring. If you look at your full book of business, and you know calculate what it would cost to offer every single one of your clients credit monitoring for 3 years, or to notify every one of your clients in writing within 5 days, or whatever the regulations are, that can become very expensive. And those are the first things that have to be done in the event of a breach. So definitely necessary to carry cyber coverage, in addition to the limit of the professional liability policy. Another very important coverage is employment practices liability. We talk about protecting ourselves, the professional services we perform for our clients. So I feel like that's like external protection. And then we talk about protecting our internal affairs. So employment practices liability covers things like harassment, wrongful termination, discrimination, and it's very necessary as we're seeing mergers and acquisitions and bringing on new staff on the rise. So in the event that any of these things come up, you have a separate policy that is able to protect you, protect the reputation, protect your reputation, protect the reputation of your business. And again, especially I'd say since like a COVID or 2020-ish, we are seeing more of these types of employment practices liability claims. So it's becoming much more necessary. And then employee theft. So I just talked about having funds under control, having family office clients, investing on clients' behalf. Um, that gives CPAs much access to client funds. And in the event something takes place where clients' funds aren't used in the way they were intended, and your client suffers a loss, there needs to be something like an employee theft or employee dishonesty. Sometimes a surety bond is required in order to protect the client funds. So that's an additional coverage. And then business owners policies. So a business owner's policy is separate from an errors and omissions or professional liability policy, but it's necessary, right? It's necessary for a small business owner, or any business owner, to think about covering their business overhead expenses, covering their property, having general liability, workers' compensation, or even ERISA bonds. And when we think about the requirement or client contracts, this is more, I see business owners policies being more of a requirement than professional liability, but the requirement of professional liability by clients is on the rise. So, this is something that, when we're working with our CPAs and our CPA firms and we talk about the full suite of products, this is part of the suite of products we have access to and we offer to protect those firms. And I will stop for questions.
Well, that timing couldn't be more perfect, Candace, because I don't know if you noticed, but I dropped off because I lost internet.
Oh, wow.
But technology, we all have a love-hate relationship with it.
Yeah.
But I just got it back, and I heard you say time for questions.
Yes, yes,
So perfect timing. Let me pull up conferences IO and see we have any questions. While I'm doing that, Candace, I know you didn't get a chance. We had your colleague Robert join
yes.
earlier and talk
Panel
through.
this morning. Yep.
Yeah. Talk through some of the trends that we're seeing, and one of the things we talked about real briefly is resources on the engagement letter around BOI reporting. And I heard you
Mhm.
mention that briefly before I went off. But where can folks find some of these resources, like that engagement letter? I know you have other sample engagement letters. Where would you direct our members to
Yep.
get some of these awesome resources?
Yep. So we have all of our BOI resources on our site, which is CPAI.com. So it's like CPA information, CPAI.com. And if you just conduct a search for BOI, it's going to bring you to the sample engagement letter. It's going to bring you to you kind of just like a landing page that gives you updates on, what's happening with BOI and what, from an insurance perspective, what the stance is. Articles that have been written by Stan Sterna, Nicole Graham. I believe there's an article by Sarah Ferentz with CNA. So we are kind of like knee deep and as close to the BOI work as we possibly can be, and actually leading and offering that engagement letter. So, and it's available to anyone. So even if you are don't have not part of the AICPA insurance program, and you need an engagement letter for BOI work, you can go to cpai.com. You can use the search tool there at the top and type in BOI, and you will come to many, many resources.
Fantastic. Great that, there's those types of resources out there for our members that are really figuring out what to do in this thing that keeps on changing, right? Even
Exactly. Again, ever changing, right? It's
ever changing.
last week was a big change to the whole BOI thing, and I think we sent out a risk report. So if you've not subscribed to our risk report, you definitely should, right? Because when these things happen, we are right on them and talking to attorneys and linking with FinCEN to find out all we need to know to share with our CPAs.
Awesome. And then you mentioned that risk alert. Is that a part on that CPAI.com where they can
Yeah.
sign up for
So
those risk alerts?
yes, yes. And
Okay.
when you're going to be served up a pop-up to register for the risk alert as you kind of navigate through the site. So if you get that pop-up and you're not registered, I definitely suggest it. Risk alert comes out every month, like right about the middle of every month. And whatever is new and good and changing is there and addressed.
Awesome. So I did see a question come up about AI policies, or what
Generative.
what type of policy would cover something like that? Um, and then I guess that also about for industry, of course,
Yeah.
member insurance programs, we think a lot about the liability insurance for a firm, but what would you say in terms of best practices, both from an insurance standpoint, for those using AI capabilities, and then also from just like a policy, like best practices
Yep.
standpoint.
So when using generative AI, if you are using it as while you're performing client work, your client should know. So number one thing is to be very forthcoming that, in performing these professional services, generative AI may be used, right? That's number one. And number two is just to not be dependent on the AI, right? We definitely don't want to take the human aspect out of it. We want to use it as a resource and a tool and not as, the main source to, complete whatever the professional services you're performing. So if it's when it comes down to engagement letters, if it's something that you've not done that you're going to start doing in the professional service that you perform for your client, it should be included in the contract. Just a clause to say, in performing your professional services, generative AI may or will be used. It won't be dependent on, my professional opinion is still, what's going to be how your services are going to be performed. So I just say be forthcoming if you're going to be using AI.
And so those types of things would be like in an engagement letter or things like
Yep.
that, and part
Yep.
of what
Just
you.
the contract, right? The client contract, the engagement letter or the contract that you use between you and your client is, it should be signed every year. We say, if there is a new service, we always talk about scope creep, right? So if there is something that happens halfway through the contract or something new that you're going to do or something that you're going to stop doing, then that contract should be updated at that time. If you may not be able to wait the full year to update the contract or get new signatures, it should be done in real time.
Sure. I want to dive a little bit more into cyber risk and insurance policies there. Are you seeing, I saw your slides, saying this is a must, right? This is every business needs to have this type of protection. Are you seeing trends in the claims in this kind of things? What has been your experience over the last kind of, I guess, 6 months to a year?
So
As
I'd say the main thing that's happening is it's kind of related to cyber, but kind of related to kind of like employee dishonesty or employee
Mm,
theft. It's social engineering.
mm,
Social engineering is and there's a kind of a fine line between how a cyber policy is going to respond and how like a employee theft or a crime policy would respond. But I'd say there is an uptick in social engineering, and that originates in most cases just like by an email or by some sort of electronic written request. And so I think that's the uptick we see related to cyber.
is that the phishing schemes? I know we all get,
Yeah.
at least I get so
Phishing,
many emails of like
yes.
my CFO
Phishing,
asking me to wire this or fill out
exactly.
this, and
Exactly. Phishing. We still see someone is hacked into my computer and, this email, they're changing, the letters in an email using an L as opposed to an I and kind of doing things like that so that you don't easily pick up on it. So
Mhm.
that's still taking place. A few years back, the number one claim just came from a lost laptop, right?
Yeah.
Or lost client files, or someone broke into my office and I noticed a stack of files was missing. So that hasn't gone away. That's kind of been reduced because everything is kind of just on your laptop and protected in that way. But the social engineering, the phishing, those are the two, I think, top things we're seeing now.
Yeah. Just in terms of best practices that you're seeing, obviously having those coverage is important, but preventing them from needing
Yep.
that
Yeah.
claim
So
in the
we
first part.
actually we have 9 questions we have our CPAs when they're renewing their policy from year to year. Do you have a firewall in place? Do you have a password usage policy? And some of our CPAs say, well, it's just me. Well, do you change your passwords? Are you using strong passwords so that no one can figure those passwords out easily?
Mhm.
Um, your password should be different on your hardware and software. right? The password you use to unlock your computer should be different than the passwords you use to access your software, the software you use to perform your client services. Um, you should secure the access and control the access where you store data, where you print data, how you send data, especially how you send data, right? I know a lot of our CPAs use different providers to send things secure. Nothing should really go out just in an open email, right? Because that can be easily accessed. But so how you store, print, send data, protecting your hardware and software with different passwords, having a firewall in place, updating the security patches regularly on your computer. Um, and then one of the other things that comes up is having a documented business continuity and disaster recovery plan, right?
Mhm.
So in the event a hacker does gain access to your system and wipes you out, right? You've got to have a way, a backup to be able to go and access your clients' files or even be able to communicate with your clients. So that's something. And then just testing whatever your backups are periodically. Even if it's with a carrier, with another provider and they're in the cloud, right? You can ask some questions like, hey, can we test this out? Like, when is the last time this has been tested? Does it work? So making sure those things are in place.
Absolutely. Yeah, having that plan ready to go. And
Mhm.
speaking of that plan, something happens. Like
Mhm.
I accidentally click on an email or we see something happening. Who do we call first? What is that first that call, email, whatever to? What
If
is should be
you
our
have cyber insurance, the very first call should be not to your client, not to whoever the email seemingly came from. You should go ahead and call your carrier. I know, just speaking from our program, the very first thing that's activated is uh, the first level of coverage is called privacy expense. And it basically forensics, right? We come in, we help you figure out how it happened and why it happened and help you figure out how to close those gaps or close those holes to prevent it from happening in the future. You don't need to call your clients. We're going to do it for you. So don't get on the phone and start calling clients and saying, hey, I've had a breach, right? Um, Call your insurance carrier. If you have a cyber policy in place, that is the first level of coverage that's activated on most cyber policies. And then I'll
what?
say that's probably in a lot of cases, if you do call your insurance carrier first, that's in a lot of cases the only level of coverage you need because we're able to help you get ahead of an actual, breach that would result in damages.
Interesting. Okay. So good to know that first call where that goes. What type of for those of us that have employees, right? It's always one thing we can control what we click on and do and when to notify and things like that. But what kind of training should we be providing to our employees, to our teams to make sure that they are up to date? I think sometimes we take for granted some of the knowledge that we have because we're the ones getting these cyber policies and things like that
Yep.
together.
So, just annual or maybe even twice a year trainings on social engineering, what it looks like. A few different examples of what social engineering looks like, what a phishing email looks like. We have something called an e-risk hub. So on our e-risk hub, you are able to go through and look at access different trainings and articles there, right? So that you're able to yourself stay up to date on. But as an employer, if you are a CPA firm, it should be something that's part of the onboarding, right? Make sure you have a password, make sure, the two-factor authentication, like all of those things should be in place and the employees should be trained to use those things.
Great. And yeah, I think twice a year, once a year, that definitely something that we all need to be doing and reminding ourselves of because they are getting more and more sophisticated.
They
Uh,
are.
it's impressive in a way.
Yes.
We don't like
Yeah.
it, but
Hmm.
it
Hmm.
is impressive how they can, fish or spoof something. We have someone in the Q&A saying, they have their coverage through Aon, and actually they said you actually emailed them about their renewals, so it's nice to see you even
Nice.
virtually.
Yeah.
But they're asking if they automatically have the options that you were recommending, or is that something that they need to kind of look through and maybe have like a consulting call with you of like making sure that they have the things they need?
So the different things I talk through is included in our cyber program. So if you do have cyber, then yes, you have those coverages. We can take a look into it for you. I can jot, I don't see the chat, but I can take a look and make sure you do have the cyber coverage. And if not, we can have a consultation. And then the questions, like the things I just went over as far as the password usage policy and the documented business continuity plan, which we do have a sample. If you need one and you want to put one in place, we have a sample we can share. But the minimum practices we go over with firms every single year at their renewal. So, in short, if you have the cyber policy included with your APL, your accountant's professional liability policy, then yes, what I just talked about is automatically included.
Awesome. Let me check and see if we've gotten any more questions in. See, we've answered that one. Somebody asked, what is ERISA? I believe that's the employee.
It's a bond.
Yeah.
An ERISA bond is like it covers again if you handle client funds, it kind of or you have any type of discretionary authority, it's a bond that basically replaces client funds if they suffer a loss. And that ERISA bonds are offered through our business owners policy. Equivalent to an ERISA bond is our employee theft that we offer on our professional liability policy, or crime or crime coverage, which is a more comprehensive policy to our employee theft.
I'm curious as we see more and more this remote work environment, and the devices that employees are using varying, like so a lot of bring your own device kind of
Mhm,
policies and things like
mhm.
that. What kind of best practices or programs are you seeing recommending or people put in place to really um, manage
Yep.
things they can't even see really?
Yep. So there should be a verification system for you if you are using a laptop, an iPad, a phone. There should be a security verification system for you to access anything that's going to take you into client data, right?
Mhm.
So I know here at Aon we use something called Okta. There's something else called Global Protect that I know some other businesses use, and that is the authenticator that will kind of transition you from surfing the web or being on TikTok to being able to go into a portal that houses all of the firm's information. So if you whether it be something that you use in a browser or an application, when you click into that application, that security measure, you should have to verify. You should have to go through a verification process in order to access that. So that kind of separates. And it's like a kind of like if you are walking into a building, how you swipe a badge before
Mm,
you are able to gain access, that kind of serves as that.
okay, makes sense. Makes sense. Let's see. Any more questions? I'm not seeing any more questions in conferences IO or in our um, chat coming through. Just as we think about the year ending, and you've worked around with this profession for many years, and especially in the with the smaller firm focus. What advice? You have the privilege of seeing inside and policy wise many firms. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for us and our members going into the next year?
It's just going to circle back to the three main things I talked about that can make or break you. Have a policy. There are some CPAs and some CPA firms that say I've been in business for a really long time and nothing's ever happened. So just protect yourself, just to have peace of mind and protect your clients, right? Be a good these you all are great business owners or great sole proprietors, however you um but you definitely want to make sure you have something in place to protect what you've worked so hard for, right? Some of these businesses have been built from the ground up. I have seen businesses grow in my tenure here, and it is very, very important that you protect that you've worked so hard to build, right? So have a policy in place. And then, like I said, those three main factors: your limits of liability, the deductible, the additional coverages, and how your claim expenses are paid. So make sure you protect yourself in that way. And then the other thing I'd say is, as you're engaging with your clients and as the profession is changing, definitely make sure your business is changing too. And if
Mm,
you don't know what to do or how your business should change, um, you can, I'm sure the MACPA has resources, AON has resources, the AICPA has resources. There are so many resources there at our fingertips that will help us stay in the know, right, with how the profession is changing and how we can change our businesses as the profession changes.
absolutely. Trying to keep up with the
Yep,
very
exactly.
fast changing profession.
Exactly.
One last question just popped in, and it's funny, it's definitely something that's related to this time of year. We're all going to be, seeing family and friends in this holiday season. And if they start to ask tax-related questions and you answer them, the person saying they're not in the practice of preparing tax returns, but people are going to ask, they're anticipating those holiday parties. They said, is there a type of policy for protection or a best approach with, friends and family, well-meaning friends and family that say, hey, you're a CPA. What should I do about this? I thought that
So
was a fun question.
I'd say to that, come think about it and come up with like a quick elevator speech, right? A quick
Mm,
spiel. I am a CPA, but I'm not your CPA, but I'll give you but this is what I would do. Just a quick one-liner disclaimer that basically says you're not my client, right? The advice I'm giving you, if you take the advice, you can't seek damages against me. So I'd say just a quick one-liner type of elevator spiel to say, I am not your professional. I don't perform professional services for you, but this is what I think. This is my opinion, right? And kind of leave it at that, right? You're always going to be, even I am backed into a corner, like, hey, I've got an insurance question for you, right? Um,
right.
so just always say, hey, this is what I think. This is my opinion. Not your professional, but and leave it at that. It's almost like a walking engagement letter that says, I'm not performing services for you, but this is what I am going to do. So I would just protect yourself in a way to say, especially against family and friends. I'm going to give you this advice. I'm going to give you my opinion, but I'm not your professional.
Great advice. Yep, I know. I'm sure a lot of people are anticipating some of those questions or even those predictions of like, what do you think is
Right.
going to happen? Um,
Right.
in the cocktail party
Yep.
conversation this year. So, thank you so much, Candice,
Sure.
for joining us.
Thank you
Our
for having
next
me.
session will begin at 11:30. So, I believe everybody will go back to the return to lobby, take a
Just
break,
gonna
and we'll
I'm
see
just going
you
to
there.
flash this one
Oh
last slide.
yeah.
So, if anyone
Oh
needs
yes.
to contact me or has any questions, there's my cell phone number, our website I talked about, cpai.com, and my email address. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn and anywhere else. So feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much, Candice. We'll see everyone in
All
the
right.
next
Take care.
session.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
guys for joining. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.